Hi everyone. Hopefully you can see my screen. Just you can see that okay? Yep, Christine's giving me a thumbs up. Fantastic. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks for joining me today. Thanks for joining us today. This is an amazing thing that you've pulled together here in a very short period of time. I'm very impressed. I'd like to talk to you today about creating self-marking quizzes with Google Forms. And just to introduce myself, so my name is Chris Betcher. I was a teacher for many, many years, about 30 years, originally an art teacher, and then kind of drifted into technology and multimedia and design and stuff like that. And I'm currently working with the Google for Education team here in Sydney, where I work with an absolutely amazing group of human beings that it always astound me at working with such a brilliant group of people. So I've got some slides for you for today that you're welcome to take away as a resource. And I've tried to design today's session in a little bit of a different way to the way I normally would. And I hope it works for you. You can get the slides there. The address is bit.ly/self-marking. And I can see someone's already dropped that in the chat. Thank you very much. So yes, just a bit.ly address, and it's a published version of the Google Slides. If anyone wants the actual version of the Google Slides, let me know and I can just share those directly with you. And thanks to Leslie Altman earlier today for reminding me that I really should be putting a Creative Commons attribution share alike on these things, so you guys know that you are more than welcome to share these resources and do something with them. So Google for Education, as I know I say this every day, but just in case it's new people, Google for Education is a suite of tools that Google give free to education. And it's our ecosystem basically is G Suite, which includes Google Classroom and Chromebooks. And I'm presenting today from a Chromebook. And I know some of you probably use Chromebooks with your kids, although probably not everyone does. But that's the Google for Education offering. And within G Suite is a collection of tools, doc sheets, slides, Gmail, whatever. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there. You can see all the icons. Today we're going to focus on the purple one, the Google Forms. And Forms, just for anyone who maybe wants to sort of become more of an expert on forms and or maybe just start with the basics of forms, we actually have a great course for Google Forms on our training center. And you can find it there on teachercenter.withgoogle.com/training. The link is right there in the notes. And it's called the First Day of Google Forms, and it's a step-by-step video course in how to get started with Google Forms. And there's a couple of videos there that are made by Google, but then there's a whole bunch of follow-up videos that are actually made by educators, and we've kind of curated them into one place as a great resource for teachers wanting to know more about forms. Thanks for that link. So Google Forms is this pretty awesome tool, and I like it because it's I mean, you've got doc sheet slides, your typical word processor, spreadsheet, and presentation tool, and other offerings do that kind of stuff. But Google Forms came along pretty early in the piece and gave teachers a really easy way to collect and manage data. And you can use it for things like creating surveys, creating questionnaires, gathering information. The school I used to work at, we used to use it for things. We used to use it for everything. We'd collect information from parents. We'd vote for school captain. We'd figure out what people wanted to bring for morning tea. We used it for everything. It's just an amazing tool for collecting information. One of the things you can do, not the subject of today's session, but I thought I'd mention it, is the ability to create branching surveys. And by that I mean you can create a questionnaire where you get to a question, and depending on how you answer, you could go this way or you could go that way. So you can design it to say, like, are you in year 7 or year 8? And they say year 7, they get a different set of questions than if they said they were year 8. Because of that branching facility that you've got there, a lot of teachers use it to do choose your own adventure stories, because kids will get in there and they'll say, you are standing in a forest, you head north or south, and you make a link and then the story goes off in different directions. So it's great for that kind of stuff. But really what I want to focus on today is the idea of self-marking quizzes. In other words, creating a form which has a series of questions that you actually want students to answer that you're then going to mark right or wrong. So you know what a quiz is, right? But it will do it automatically. So you don't have to manually go through and mark things at the end. And I think that's a huge potential there for some time savings. And that's the one thing teachers don't have nearly enough of is time. So hopefully I can give you some of that back. And also this idea of locked mode quizzes. Now this will only work, I think my next slide is about that. Here you go, locked mode quizzes. So a locked mode quiz, just to be clear on this, it only works on managed Chromebooks. So if you're in a school where the kids have Chromebooks and they're being managed by the school or by the system, this will work for you. If you don't have Chromebooks or they're not managed, this won't work for you, okay? But what locked mode is a little bit, think about it as NAPLAN mode, right? You can basically make a quiz and then lock it down so when the students are taking that quiz, they can't do anything else on their computer. They can't open another tab and search for answers. They can't Google for the results. They literally can't leave the quiz until they hit the submit button in the end, and then it hands their computer back to them. So I just want to mention that just in case you're in that situation with managed Chromebooks. It's a really neat feature that lets you really use the quiz feature inside Google Forms for some fairly high stakes testing if you want to use it for that kind of thing. I mentioned branching forms briefly, and again, not going to dwell on it today, but I just want to outline how this works. Inside Google Forms, there's the ability to create sections. So if you design a form in sections, you can create, using multiple choice questions, the ability to jump to different questions. And so you can see I've got a little map there, and it typically works like this. You start with an introduction and you'd ask a multiple choice question. If they choose option 1, they'll go to the blue section. If they choose option 2, they go to the red section, and eventually they'll meet back together at the end when they submit. So the flowchart I've drawn there is to sort of give you the conceptual idea of how they work. And the little screen grab I've got on the right-hand side there is actually what it looks like in Google Forms itself. And you can see the form is divided up into sections, and the logic for managing that, for like flowing through those sections, is in that first part up there, which is a multiple choice question. If you're interested in trying it out, in fact, I'll just do this. I'll just give you a little example here. I've made a sample you're willing to play, happy to play with. So really dumb, simple example, but you know, do you like cats or dogs? If you say cats and go next, you get some questions about cats, right? I think I like tabby cat, right? Next, then it's through to the end. Now I'm trying to be a bit funny with this one. I said, do you now understand how branching works? If you say no, it takes you all the way to the beginning again, so you can do it again because I'm using branching, right? Now, if you say dogs and you say next, now you get some dog questions. And of course, who doesn't love golden retrievers, right? And so now, so that's how a branching question works. It's this idea that depending on what you answer, you get a different outcome. Okay, let's get to the meat of this. Okay, so to get started with forms, if you guys would like to play along at home, feel free to open another tab and play along, and we'll make a little form together. But really what I want to spend most of the time in today is giving you tons of examples about how forms can be used and the different variations of the way you can create forms questions. Because I think once you understand how to make a form, it's actually pretty easy. There's not a lot to it, but it's just being, I think, sometimes being sparked with a bunch of ideas about how you might use this in the classroom and the types of questions you might ask. So you can launch forms. I can think of 3 ways you can launch forms. One is to go up to the waffle, the little button in the top corner of your Chrome browser, and click on the waffle and find the forms link. The other is if you're inside Google Drive, you can go Drive, New, More, Google Forms. Or there's a nice little shortcut. If you're in a browser window, you can just type forms.new as the URL, and it will actually create a new form for you. So I'm just going to, and let's just go in and do that. So as you see, here's the waffle. I can go there and I can find forms in here somewhere. There it is there. But I'll show you the little shortcut. If I just go and type forms.new as an address, it actually creates a new form for me. That's a nice little trick. By the way, that works with docs.new, sheets.new, slides.new, drawings.new. It's a lovely little shortcut for creating a new document on the fly. All right, I'm trying to keep my eye on the chat. Fantastic, that looks good. Christine, you'll alert me to anything in the chat if it comes up that's important. So here we are in a brand new Google form. I'm going to assume, maybe wrongly or rightly, that most of you have seen forms before in some manner or shape. So I won't dwell too much on the creation of it, but I want to highlight a few issues to you. Up here, you've got a place for a title, so you can put whatever you want, you know, English quiz, whatever you want to put there. You can write it. I always recommend you write a description, and then you, of course, you just start putting your questions in. So, you know, what was Shakespeare's first name? Now I got to spell Shakespeare. Shakespeare's first. I'm a much better speller than I am a typist. Right? So we'll fix that. Okay, so you put your question in, and then of course, if it's a multiple choice question, which is kind of commonly the kind of question you'd ask, and what I want you to take away from the end of today is to know that that is not the only type of question you can use self-marking for. Okay, so what was Shakespeare's first name? Was it Chris? Was it John? Was it Mark? Or was it William? Right? William. Okay, so there's our first question. It's as simple as that. You notice up here there's different types of questions you can ask. I want to come back to talk about that in a minute, but just be aware there's lots of different types of questions. Once you've done that question, you can click this plus button and add a second question. And it comes in at the bottom just like that. Now you're working on question 2. I'm just going to make this really simple to have one question in my quiz for now. All right, so right now I have process whenever I work on quizzes, and I'm very process driven. Like, I kind of know the order I want to do things, and I'll share that with you in a slide. Actually, I'll just go back and show you that slide right now. This is my process when working on making quiz, form, anything in form. So the first thing I always do when I'm designing a form for anything at all, be it a quiz or a survey or anything, the first question you ask yourself, what am I actually trying to find out? If it's a quiz, you might be trying to find out, what do my kids know? If it's, you know, if it's you're voting on school captain, it's, you know, who do I want, who does the population want to be the school captain, right? Find out what it is you actually want to know. That's a really important first step. Then decide what data you need to collect in order to get that information. And there's a subtle difference between information and data. Information is knowing who you want to, or knowing that you need to select someone for school captain. Data is collecting the numbers so you can actually find out who that is. Okay, there's an important but subtle distinction between the two. Then my process, once I know what I want, is create a new Google form, add the questions and sections, make sure I use the right question types. If it's a quiz, I have to enable quiz mode and then set my correct answers and the feedback. Then I would check the settings to make sure the form is going to behave the way I want, and then add a theme to make it look nice, so it looks the way I want it to. And then, super important, it's in red, test your quiz, test your form, right? Make sure it works. Especially critical if you're doing branching forms, because they can get really complicated. You need to test every single branch to make sure everything works the way you want it to. It is definitely worth spending time testing your quiz before you distribute it, because you don't want to have to try and fix it once it's out there, right? Then the next step, you should distribute it to your users, and you can distribute it through Classroom, via email, via a URL. You can embed it into another website, or you can send it out on the social streams like Twitter and Facebook. And then finally, the last step is to analyze your results and export out to a sheet. So that's my process, and I always do things in pretty much that order whenever I'm designing for quiz of some sort. Okay, let's go back to the quiz here. So what I want to know is, does the student know who Shakespeare was, right? So I've designed a question here. It's a multiple choice question. The next thing I ought to do is turn this into a quiz. So to turn it into a quiz, up here in the gear wheel in the top corner, you'll notice I've got general, presentation, and quizzes. This always generally defaults to restricting to users in your domain. Now, if you want someone outside of your domain, like say a parent, to be able to access a form, you need to turn this off. If you don't, then they'll get asked to log in. And of course, they don't have to log in, okay? So do check to make sure this setting is the way you want it to do. I'll go to quizzes, and to turn a survey, so I'm not just asking a survey question, what was Shakespeare's first name? I want to actually be a real quiz. So I need to flip this little switch here to say, make this a quiz. Once you make this into a quiz, the form behaves slightly differently, which I'll show you. I mentioned locked mode before. If that's something you want to take advantage of, here's where you turn it on. And why can't I turn this on right now? Oh, because this is not a managed Chromebook. Okay. So I
Chris, just an interruption there. Somebody's asked, can you put a time limit on a quiz so that the quiz only runs for a certain amount of time?
Yeah, someone asked me that the other day. There is an extension called Timify, Timify. It's a third-party tool, but it does let you put time limits on. It's not super complicated to use, but it's not as simple as flicking a switch. So you basically install the Timify extension into Forms. You enable it in the particular quiz that you want to time. And then you go back to the Timify website where you'll now see your form listed there, and you can set all your parameters there for how long you want it to time for. It will then generate a specific URL for each student. The thing I don't like about Timify is that it doesn't play nicely with Google Classroom. You actually have to generate a unique URL for every student. That's how it knows who's who, and then it emails them out. So as long as your kids have email, it's fine. I'd love it if it would work with Classroom, but currently it does not. But it does work for timing. Hope that helps with that. So that's how you do that. I've enabled the quiz mode. Once I've enabled quiz mode, you notice now I've got this extra button down the bottom here that says answer key. Answer key, when I click on that, it now lets me in to say two things. One is, how much is this question worth? I've set it to 1 point. And what's the answer? Well, in this case, it's William. And here's the bit that I really don't want you to miss. Add answer feedback. You know, we give kids quizzes and tests all the time, and that's not just an opportunity to test what they know, but it's an opportunity to help them know more. So you can actually add feedback in here, and you can give a kid feedback for if they get the answer correct, they can get like very good, fantastic. And then you can attach either a link or a YouTube video to this feedback so that they might get the correct answer. And it's like, fantastic, you know his first name. Now click on this video to watch a short clip about Shakespeare's life, right? So you can use this as an opportunity, not just to test to see if they know something, but to extend their knowledge. And that's where the real power of this comes from. You're actually, I think, making thinking visible that way. So I'll just click the done button there. You can see now that's showing that this is the correct answer. So that's setting up a quiz is as simple as that. But do you notice that when I move my mouse over these answers, I get this little button that appears on the side here that says add image. What you can do if you want is you can add a picture to each of these choices. And in fact, up here where the question is, if I move my mouse near the question itself, I also get that option. And I can now add a picture to the question. Okay. Now, I'm just going to stop there for a second and go back to here because I want to just clarify things. So I mentioned before, as we're creating the questions, I pointed out there's that little plus sign on the side there that you create new questions. I just want to tell you what the rest of those things do. Underneath the plus sign, which is simply to create a new question, you now have this brand new option. It only was released a little while ago, where you can add questions from another form. So if you've already created a quiz, or let's use quizzes as the example, you've created a quiz and it's got some questions in it, and you now want to reuse one of the questions in the old quiz in the new quiz, you can reach in using that button and find a question from a previous quiz and import it in. Let me show you how that works. So if I go back to my quiz now, and I go to the import questions button, you notice it opens up only forms, and I've got one here called World Geography Quiz. Let's go into there. And it's now going to bring up all the questions that were in the World Geography Quiz over here on the side panel. And I can say, oh, let's say that one there, I want that question, and maybe this question. And I can do that and import those questions. And now those two questions come in, and you can see this is an example of what I was talking about, where you can put a picture at the top of the quiz. And where's the other one? There it is there. There's another similar example. So that ability to be able to pull questions in using this import button, huge time saver. And in fact, if I was in, say, I don't know, the geography department at school, and we collectively, because of course you can work together on quizzes, they're collaborative, like every Google tool, you can use this add collaborators link here. So you can have multiple teachers collaborating on a quiz, maybe collecting a bank of questions that later on, when you're creating a new quiz, you can simply reach into that collaborative bank and pull a question out. If you're in my session yesterday, we talked about the lesson library. It's a similar kind of idea where you create one resource where you can just pull stuff in from elsewhere. Okay, so that's how you do that. The other thing I wanted to show you is this one here. And sort of question types for a sec. You know, there's a saying that when you give someone a hammer, sometimes they only, so if you give someone a hammer, then everything starts to look like a nail, right? But someone gets really good at using one tool and they see that as a solution for everything. And I see that a lot when I see teachers using forms, because they discover, oh, I can do multiple choice questions, and suddenly like everything's a multiple choice question from that point forward, right? And the truth is there's all different types of questions here. And I think if you can mix them up and use them and get the right question type for the right type of data you're trying to collect, that actually makes a huge difference. Now, you don't have to do it now, but I've put a link there, bit.ly/allthequestions, which points to a Google form, which gives you an example of every different question type. So it's got short answer, paragraph, multiple choice, checkbox, drop down, file up. It's got every example in there, so you can have a play with that. It then goes into sort of showing you examples of how you put pictures in and how you use video and all that. So if you're looking for an example of I wanted to see what all these questions look like, hopefully that will be useful for you. There's two on there that I think are greatly underutilized by teachers: multiple choice grid and checkbox grid. Because they look a bit complicated when you go and set them up. But once you understand how they work, they're super useful question types. And I'll give you an example of that as we go along. Let's focus on the self-marking questions, because that's what we're here for. So self-marking literally means that you can create a question. When the student does it, the system will automatically grade it because you've told it in advance what the correct answer is. Because it's self-marking, it can really only mark things that have a correct answer, right? So you couldn't send it off on, you couldn't get the kids to write a short answer or an essay type question and mark that, obviously, because that is more complicated than simple yes or no answer. So the types of questions you can self-mark: short answer, multiple choice, checkbox, and drop down. And we recently added multiple choice grid and checkbox grid as a self-marking option. And I've got examples of all of these for you. So there's a link here, bit.ly/self-marking questions. Again, this is similar to all the questions link I just told you about. This is a form which has samples of all the different ways you can use multiple choice questions. So I'm going to take you through this and just show you a few examples. So if I was doing this, you're welcome to do this in the background as well. So my email address, I'm just going to collect that. It's betcha@google.com. Okay, my name. Things like names obviously won't be marked. So when you set a self-marking quiz up, you can determine which questions get marked and which ones don't. And you simply do that by not assigning a point value. You notice this question down here has a 1 point value on it, whereas this one does not, because obviously it's a name, right? I'm not going to mark it. So you just set the point value to 0 and it counts it as a non-question, a non-markable question. Try and make my screen a little bigger for you. Hopefully that's a little easier to see. Okay, so first question. This is an example of a typical question that most teachers will use. It's text and text. It's a text question with text answers, right? What's the capital of Australia? Canberra. Boom, done, right? This is an example of text plus images. So I showed you before, the little image icon. You ask the question as text, but you give the options as images. So which one is Canberra? I believe it's that one there. Okay. Next example is you'd have image plus text. So in this case, I'm using an image as the prompt and text as the responses. It's the opposite of what I just showed you. What is that? That's Canberra. The answer is nearly always Canberra for this particular quiz, by the way. Then, of course, you can do both. You can have a picture prompt and picture options as well. So in this, what's the question? One of these landmarks is not found in the pictured city. I believe it is Luna Park at St Kilda. So that would be the answer there. Sometimes if you do a multiple choice question, you only give them 2 options. Well, now you can create true and false type questions. Okay. So true and false question is just a multiple choice with 2 options. True or false, Alice Springs is the capital of Australia? I believe that's false. If you have a lot of options, so it's like a multiple choice type question, but you have not just sort of 4 options, you might want to use a drop-down list. So for this, for example, of the list of ACT suburbs, which is closest to the city of Canberra, you can see I've got a long list there. This would be a little bit awkward to do as a multiple choice. It would just take up a lot of space on the screen. So much better as a drop-down. And the answer, by the way, is Braddon. Okay. So now here's an interesting one. This is great for language teachers or anyone who's teaching something where you have audio is an important thing. You can actually use the talk and comment extension to put audio files in here. So when I click that,
Canberra,
right, it actually plays
Canberra,
right? It actually plays little audio files. Now, how do I do that? Let me just go back out to my form for a second and show you. Let's find my let's say I wanted this question to be done with audio. So what I've done is I've installed this little extension up here called Talk and Comment. It's just a Chrome extension. If I go to the Chrome Web Store and search for Talk and Comment, T-A-L-K and comment, you'll see it will find it right. Come on, internet. I was supposed to go to NBN today and they came and said they couldn't connect it. So talk and comment, it's just this one here. You just click the button here to enable it. Once it's enabled, you get this little floating button that sits on the side like this. Now, I will suggest to you that the talk and comment, when you enable it, it has a switch here to turn it on and off. I would only turn it on when I need it, because I just have noticed sometimes that it can give you a bit of a performance hit in the browser, especially if you're using spreadsheets. So my advice on this is just turn it off if you're not using it. Just turn it on when you do need it, okay? But what you can do once you do that, once it's enabled, when I click this little button now, it immediately starts recording like this. Oh, my name is Chris. And then spit out like this, a link. And I can simply copy that link and paste it into that field there like that. And then that will show up as a little playable field. So it's a third-party extension. It's not a native part of Google Forms, but it is actually a really easy way to add audio files into not only forms, it will actually add them anywhere you like, because it's just a piece of, it's just a HTML URL. It points to a site. And so as long as, now the students, I believe, do have to have the talk and comment extension installed on their machines in order to see the little play things. If they don't, they can click on the link, it'll open in another page and it'll play. But if you want to see the little player, like what I had here before, the little player like that, they need to have the extension running. Okay. Can it read the question to the student? Well, it can't read the question because it's not actually a text-to-speech thing. But what you can do is you can type the question, and then you can make a recording of yourself reading the question and just put it next to it, so you can have both. I hope that answers that question. So yeah, I really like that. So it's got some wonderful possibilities there for playing, sound clips or sound effects or pronunciations, whatever. This question here is an example of a form question where you can have more than one correct answer. So before Canberra was built, which 2 cities thought they should be Australia's capital city? If you know your history, you probably know it was Sydney and Melbourne. So to get this question correct, you have to put Sydney and Melbourne, right? Now, if you put just one, you don't get half points. The way that these multiple selection answers work is that you have to have everything selected in order to get the answer correct, okay? So there's no partial marks being awarded. Moving down here, you've got the ability down here to have short answer questions. So in this one here, the architect design was Walter Burley Griffin. So if I type in Griffin, right, oops, sorry, Griffin, okay, that will mark that as correct. And all it's doing is matching the word Griffin that I've typed with the word Griffin that I've indicated is the correct answer in the back. Okay, as soon as I'm done showing you this, I'll show you how you set that up. And by the way, what happens if a student was to type Griffin, lowercase, no capital G? Would that be acceptable or not? And the answer is it depends on whether you've allowed it. When you indicate to the question what the correct answer is, you can indicate the different spellings and variations that you're willing to tolerate. And so, you know, if you've said you'll accept lowercase g, it will accept it, otherwise it won't. It'll literally match case sensitive to whatever you put as the answer. In terms of video questions, there is no question that is a video type of question, but what you can do is you can insert a video into a form, and then in a separate question, you see these two boxes are not connected, there's a space between them, right? You can actually put the video in as a video and then immediately under it ask a question about the video. And it actually makes sense when you think about it, because if you're going to get kids to spend a couple of minutes watching a video, you're probably going to ask more than one question. So it actually makes sense that the video would play. Click that, you'll see that will just play to the link there, right, like that. And then I can ask several questions about it, but you really only want the video once, okay? So it kind of makes sense. You can also ask questions like this: how interesting did you find this video? So you can say, oh, I thought it was a 4 out of 5, right? This is obviously not going to be graded because this is asking for an opinion. So some questions, you can just mark them as non-grading. You see there's no score in the corner of this one. And so you can have non-graded, non-auto-marked questions in amongst auto-marked questions, no problem. This is the grid question. I need to make that small so you can see it. Okay, this is an example of a multiple choice grid question. Okay, and while it looks a little complicated, it actually is quite a powerful way. One of the questions we get about Google Forms sometimes is there a way of making questions that are like matching questions, right? And very often, you know, people think in terms of matching, they'll think of like a drag and drop kind of thing. There's no drag and drop option in Google Forms, but you can get the same result. If you want kids to be able to match one thing against another, you can do it with this style of question. So for example, the Brindabella Ranges is found in the ACT, Mount Coot-tha is in Queensland, Ingaloo Reef is in WA, and so on. That's in Tas, Jim Jim Falls is in MT, Barossa is in South Australia, Yarra Valley is in Vic, and so on. So I am matching one thing against another. I'm not doing it with a drag and drop, which is what most people assume would be the matching kind of thing, but I'm getting the same intellectual result by doing it this way. So that's called a multiple choice grid question. And again, they have to get, well, this one will actually give them a point for every one they get correct. Okay. Yes, so that question would be worth 7 points because there's 7 things in there. And finally, the last question here is what we call a checkbox grid question. And this one where you can have, it's exactly the same as this one, except you can have more than one selection in a row. You notice here, if I choose Western Australia, I can't also choose Victoria. It's one or the other. Whereas this type of question I can have, so a carnivore is both a dingo and a Tasmanian devil. And a herbivore is both a kangaroo and a koala and a wombat. So same type of question, I can just have multiple selections in each row. Okay, now when I submit this, you can see it has recorded my results. And if I view my score now, if you go down here, you'll see here's question 1 out of 1. Correct, it's green. And I mentioned the feedback before, so here's an example of feedback. So the student got this question correct, and I've built in here into the feedback. So if you get the question correct, it says, very good. Are you guys still receiving me okay? I just got a message saying my video is doing weird things. Still getting me okay? Okay. So here's an example of the feedback. The student got it right, so it says, oh, very good, capital city, although it was blah, 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 a little bit of information, and here's a video I can watch to learn a bit more about Canberra. That's what I mean about trying to use the feedback here to not just tell them they were right or wrong, but to also help them learn a little bit more as well. There's also a link down here, learn more, and if I click that, I've set that up to take me to a website which has a little bit about the history of another video feedback form there to make it a learning experience, not just a testing experience. Okay, and as I go down there, you can see these are all the other questions. It tells me I got things correct. Here's another piece of feedback, you know. Oh, actually, I'll show you this one. This is interesting. So this question here, you remember they were given these 4 photos. and they had to select which one was Canberra, and they picked this one. In the feedback on this, it says, great, the road in the photo is Anzac Parade, stretching between the War Memorial and Parliament House, blah, blah, blah. Like, it gives you a little blurb about what they're seeing. But then it says there's a link here, explore Canberra in, GE stands for Google Earth. If I click that link, it actually opens the Google Earth page, and it aligns me to that exact location where I've just set up. I don't know how far it's going at the moment.
Chris, your audio is playing up when you are putting too much load on your internet.
Okay. All right. Well, I will try not to do that. Oh, you guys can play. You've got the link. We can have a little look at that yourselves. Okay, and so on and so forth. So there's the quiz answers there that have all been self-marked. Oh, I forgot to do that one, so I got everything wrong. There you go. Got distracted. You can see here's the one that had the 2 correct answers. Here's the one down here where the word had to match. Apparently I forgot to do that one as well. And that's how the responses come out for the multiple choice grid question and there for the checkbox grid question. Okay, so just to go back to my slides for a second. Let's go back to here. So I'll just pause there for a second. I've been doing a lot of talking. Does anyone want to just pop a question in or unmute your mic if you feel like you'd need to, and feel free to ask any questions. I'll just pause for a moment.
Chris, Daniel here from St Margaret Mary's Marylands in Sydney. Just wanted to say thank you for the multiple choice grid, because I've noticed that we've just been trying to do Seesaw, and we're trying to get parents to fill out some sort of survey, but we wanted to not have, the one we have is basically agree, strongly agree to strongly disagree, but there's only 4 options because we're using the multiple choice. They only give you 2 options to actually write a description, if that makes sense. Right. So that multiple choice grid enables more writing, if that makes sense, in terms of like what each specific dot point would mean. So thank you for that.
No worries. Multiple choice grids are an amazing question type. I really think they're underrated. I'll just give you an example of one here. This is how a multiple choice grid question looks. If I just switch to multiple choice grid, you see it gives me rows and columns. And a very typical one, the way you'd use this, you'd say, how do you feel about, right? And you'd ask a question. So you'd say, give me junk food is good for you, right? You'd make a statement, and then you'd make another statement like exercise is worth doing. So you kind of make statements, that kind of thing, and then over here you'd put strongly disagree. Oops, sorry. You know where I'm going with this, right? I'll just try and do it for you. Disagree. And then you'd have agree. Right. And then you'd have strongly agree. Okay, so.
That's exactly what I was talking about, Chris. Thank you so much. I'm going to go change one of the forms now.
And you can have as many of these as you like. People who work in marketing and sort of market research stuff always tell me you should never have a middle option. You should always have an even number of choices, so you force people to go one way or the other. If you give people a middle option, they'll nearly always pick it, and then you have really no usable data because you don't know how they feel about anything. So when you look at that quiz, and so what I'll do now is I'll be designing this quiz. I'm just going to click on the little eye up here to preview it to see what it looks like. And so here's what the quiz will look like to the public, or to the students, to the audience, to whatever we want to call them. So there's the first question. You can see it's a picture with multiple choices. Same with this one. It's a picture with multiple choices. This one here was just a multiple choice question text, and I played around with a little text thing there at the end, which.
Hello, my name is Chris Betcher.
Right. So.
Hello.
Stop. But this is how the multiple choice grid looks. You can see it's put the statements on the side, and you can say strongly disagree, whatever. So you can put. It's a really nice question type, and that's a multiple choice grid. If I go back over here, you'll see I have the grid, and the other option was the tick box grid, which is exactly the same. It lets you just do more than one selection per row. That's the only difference between the two. But just be aware that not every one of these, so for example, a linear scale can't auto mark, a paragraph question can't auto mark. Okay, it's just these other ones where you can auto mark it because they usually have a right or wrong answer or something you can match. Now, how do you match that? Let me just, I showed you in the, where are we here? Sorry, I showed you in the Shakespeare question. Let me just get rid of that talk and comment thing. I showed you in the Shakespeare question how to set your correct answer, you need to go to the answer key. So we're now looking at kind of the back of the question. This is where you set your point value and your correct answer. And this is where you add your feedback if you want to add feedback for correct or incorrect answers. This is where you can add links or YouTube videos if you want to sort of add some resources to that feedback. And the link could, like, it could be you as a teacher making a video of yourself talking in Screencastify, giving personal feedback to the student. You know, congratulations, you got this question right, well done, you know, whatever it might be. You can link to any, the power of the internet. But I just want to show you the sort of short answer question. So it might be, you know, what is the capital of, oh my goodness, of France, right? Now, I'm not going to make it multiple choice. I want this question to be short answer because I want them to actually type the answer in. So this is what the question is going to look like. Now, when I set the answer key for a short answer question, what I have to do is add the correct answer. So the correct answer, of course, is Paris. And this is what I meant before when I said, like, would you be prepared to accept if a student types Paris without a capital P? If you are, you need to put it in as an option. What if they type it with all capitals? Well, if you're prepared to accept that as an answer, then fine. You might even be prepared to accept if a kid types in Paris with 2 R's. It's not right, but you might be willing to accept it because it's close enough. Okay, whatever you're willing to accept as a close enough or correct answer needs to be listed here, and it will simply match the student's response to whatever's in this list. You can have as many as you like there, by the way. Okay. You also have the option to say mark all other answers as incorrect. So if they type anything else, it's just going to know it's wrong. Okay.
5 minutes, Chris.
Okay, thanks. So let's just say this question here, this junk food one was also, this doesn't have right or wrong answers, but let's just assume it did for a second. The answer key for this is you go in here, you say, like, this is the right answer, and that's the right answer, and that's going to be worth 1 mark, and that's going to be worth 1 mark. Okay, so that's how you would set up the scoring system for a multiple choice grid, and you'd say done. And so now that question, when I go back to it, is worth 2 points. So I hope that makes sense to everybody. Let me just go back to get out of there, get out of there. The other one I just wanted to show you was, if I can get to it. I mean, it is also possible to put questions there that are not auto-graded. And an example of that, I've given you one here. If you want to play with this, it's called bit.ly/human graded. Why can I not get that? Let me just put in bit.ly/human graded. So this is an example of a quiz, but the type of questions this quiz is asking are things like, describe a time in your life when you were faced with a challenge and briefly explain how you overcame that. Clearly, that's not a question you can auto-mark, right? What did you learn about yourself? Clearly not an auto-mark question. So how would you deal with this type of stuff? So if I let's just fill it in. So I'm just going to do this, and I'll just put blah, 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 whatever. I'm just typing something in there, right? So I type some sort of long answer in there. This is my response. When I submit that, what the teacher actually sees, if I can now go in and find that quiz, which is somewhere in here. Just want to show you what comes into the back end of it here. Quizzes. So it was one called Quiz Questions Human Mark. Okay. So this is the working version of this. You can see that there are now 4 responses to it. I did 3 tests last night, and I just did another one right now. You guys watched me do. So when I come in here, I actually see the summary of what the responses have been to these questions. This is me, betcha@google.com, the one I just did now. It has not been scored right now. It has not been released right now. And so as the teacher, I would come into the back end here and go individual and find the student I'm looking for. And now I'm seeing that student's answers down here, right? So this student gave me a really good answer. I'm going to grade that student 2 out of 10 for that one. And this one here, at least he wrote a bit more. I'm going to give him 3 out of 10 for that one. So I can manually grade questions in here. Now it's kind of, I don't know if it's a bug or what, like unless a student was to get 10 out of 10 for that question, this is going to show, oh, why did that go? Normally goes green. Interesting. Unless you give a student 4 marks out of 10 here, this will kind of indicate that it's not correct because it's not kind of 4 marks. The student never sees that, so don't worry about it. Once I've graded it, I can hit the save button, and then I can say release the score. And when I hit that button, and I say I'm sending this to that student, send emails and release, it's now going to send that to that student. And if I was to go and check my email now, and on the other computer it just arrived, it's telling me what my score was. So if you do need to manually mark stuff, you can in fact do that. And I'll just real quickly show you the procedure for that. Remember when we set up our quiz, oh, where'd it go? Oh no, I closed the wrong thing. Recent. So this is the form we're working on a second ago. And remember we went to this view up here and we went to the quizzes and we turned on quiz mode, right? Down the bottom, there's a bunch of things there. It says, when do you want to release the mark? If you choose immediately after each submission, then as soon as the kid submits, assuming they can be auto-graded, it'll auto-grade and send them their results immediately, right? Or provide them a link to get their results. If you turn this bit on, then it will not give them their results immediately, and it'll take you into that back-end process that I just showed you, where you as the teacher can go through and manually review stuff. And you can manually review any type of question, okay? So it doesn't just have to be the long answer ones. You can review their short answer questions if you want. And also you can indicate down here what it is you want students to be able to see when their results are released to them. So you might want to see their points, but not their correct answers. Maybe you're trying to do the test a second time and you want to see if they remember it, so that's not giving them their answers now. So you've got complete control over how that works. So there's that. And I realise we are definitely running out of time, so I'll just go a couple of things here. One of the things I don't know if you'll realise that in Google Forms, under 3 box up here, there's the option to print. And it actually does something rather clever, I think, is when you go to the print option, let's present my screen here. When you go to the print option here, the Google form will actually reformat itself to make it more suitable for a printed version. So I'll put the same quiz here. This is how the web sees it. This is how the print version sees it. And in fact, it's not the same one, but I've got one here. I don't know if you can see my screen or not. So like there's an example of, this is how it prints out. You can see in the questions there, it actually, multiple choice questions, for example, it gives you the little colored boxes to color in. If it's a short answer question, it gives you a line to write on. So it actually does reformat the quiz to make sense for paper rather than for web. Bearing in mind that if you have video questions or audio questions, obviously paper can't do that. So it will obviously just not let you do anything with that. If you want to have a play with any of these, I've got 2 little short activities that you can do in your own time as a practice. One is to create a self-marking quiz. Just make a little short 3-question quiz, but use some different question types. Try adding some feedback, try getting some different answers, and then take the test a few times yourself to try it out. That's one little activity you can do as a practice. And the second one, if you want to play with the branching forms, just try and make a branching form. Try and ask a simple. Whenever I do these things, I start with really dumb, simple examples that help me understand how it works. So like, you know, is it a cat or is it a dog? That's not a useful question, but it helps me understand how branching works.
And so I would always recommend to you, whenever you're learning a new tool, I almost never try and use a new tool that I'm not familiar with to build something that I'm seriously going to use. I always build a couple of dumb, simple, funny examples for myself just to understand it. And once I understand it, then I start to build stuff that's actually useful for people. So for what that's worth.